Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik with Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it. Hey everyone, welcome to the Figured Out Cast. This is for November 2017. I'm Adam Koralik, and thank you very much for joining me. Of course, this is a Patreon podcast, so if you are on my Patreon, you get this right away the day it comes out. And if you're watching this publicly after it's been out for a few weeks, I still appreciate you doing that at any time of your choosing. If you want, you can follow the links in the description. You can get this early, as well as all my videos, or almost all my videos, end up there early as well. So I really appreciate the support. Thank you very much for doing that, especially with Adpocalypse being what it is. Very, very appreciative. Let's just put it that way. But yeah, so today we're going to be talking about a whole host of different subjects here. They are in the description. You can check them out. You can also skip around, look at timecode if there's one subject in particular you're more interested or less interested in. But yeah, so let's just go on and get started with it. So the first thing I wanted to talk about actually is some upcoming videos that I will be having, just for those of you who, because I realize I don't talk about the actual channel all that much. So I thought some of you guys would enjoy it. Now, this is obviously a little weird because to Patreon backers, this is like news. If you're not a Patreon backer, then this is more of like a recap of the things you saw, with one exception. So this month, every year I've been doing videos on the anniversary of the PS4, the Wii U, and the Xbox One. I will be doing that this year, or I have done that this year. If you missed it, feel free to check it out. And if you're looking forward to it, yay. You see, this is fundamentally weird trying to play this from both sides, but it's true. The videos will exist. You can enjoy them, or they do exist, and you can enjoy them now. Isn't that crazy? But yeah, I've released a few videos this month already. Of course, I did a, well, I guess technically that was in October, but I did this video on OG Xbox backwards compatibility, which we're actually going to talk a little bit more about in this. However, that'll be more like a PS to that. So if you haven't seen the original OG Xbox backwards compatibility video I did, please check that out. But this is just gonna be a little bit more notes. Now, upcoming videos into December, this is gonna be news for both of you guys. I went to Japan back in October, and I was able to film, I got 4 videos worth of content. 3 of them will be coming out in December. One of them will be coming out on November 29th. So just shortly after this video goes public, you'll be able to enjoy that as well. That video will be a Shenmue video. That's all I'm going to say. But the stuff in December is all pickups videos from Japanese game stores. Now, there's also going to be various videos. This month, I also did one on a CF card modded Dreamcast, which is either out or will be out soon, depending on when you're hearing this. That thing is pretty sweet, so you can check that out. I also did one on an RGB SCART modified NES, as well as a live stream from Toronto with Scott the Canadian and Re-Res TV Shane, my friend. Now, I may or may not do another live stream at some point in November, but I'll definitely do one in December as well. So if you missed it, you can always check that out. So that's kind of what's going on there. A lot of content, not slowing down anytime soon, hopefully, especially with your support. I really appreciate that. So anyway, so yeah, that's what's going on with the channel. You know, they're okay. They could always be better, but yeah, hopefully I'm not going anywhere anytime soon, which is nice. So let's get on to some news that isn't pertaining to me. First things first, so not too long ago, at the time I record this, PlayStation did a big conference in Paris, where they basically just showed a lot of update trailers for various things like The Last of Us 2 and things like that. And unfortunately, I missed the conference when it was actually live, so I didn't get to follow it, you know, and be part of the energy of it. But I kind of looked at some of the stuff later, and if you guys saw my PS4 4 years later video, or you will be seeing it, one of my points, and I still hold true to this, is basically, long story short, I think the PS4 is going to be a really good console to have in 2018. I think it was 2017 was kind of a weird link year where it was just kind of connecting 2016 and 2018, because those were 2 bigger years, and 2017 was just kind of like the workhorse year to just kind of gear you up for 2018. But again, I talked about all of that in a video already. But yeah, I still maintain that, and that conference is kind of part of why I think that. But yeah, I think that 2018 will be really good for the PS4. That would be my guess. I think it'll probably sell pretty well in general. The PS4 Pro, especially when it's going up against the Xbox One X, being a substantially cheaper option, will probably be nice for it. But game content wise, I also feel like that will probably be pretty solid. I mean, they have a lot of quality stuff coming up. And, people shit on Xbox for any number of reasons, and I defend it in a lot of ways. Because I like to defend what I call reality. So when somebody's doing something good in one of these companies, I'll defend it. And when somebody's doing something shitty, I will, knock it. It doesn't matter which company is which. I'm for good quality experiences, regardless of platform. But even though I defend the shit out of Microsoft for giving us OG Xbox backwards compatibility, or at least starting in on that program, I do knock them for the reality that they really have sucked horribly with exclusive content for the last year, with basically the exception of Cuphead, which is its own entity, So I give a lot of credit to Sony for really trying very hard to have worthwhile, unique, first-person basically experiences on their platform, and I salute them for that. So that's the long and the short of it. What I kind of came away with that conference from was that you have a lot to look forward to next year. So moving on to our next subject. This one was a little interesting, and I'm sure this is kind of out-of-date information, but I still wanted to give my take on it because people were asking me about it. GameStop PowerPass. Now, GameStop announced this program called PowerPass, where if you sign up for their, rewards system, which is our Power-Up Club or whatever it is, like, it's a basic free program. You can also sign up for a paid program called PowerPass. Now, basically the way it works is you pay them $60 for a membership, and it's good for 6 months. Now, what you get for that is the ability to basically buy a used game and return it at any point of your choosing and swap it out for another one unlimited for 6 months. It's essentially a rental service. And at the end of the rental service, you get to keep a used game. So you're essentially paying $60 for 6 months worth of gaming, and you even get to keep a game. So it sounds like a pretty good deal if you're interested in renting stuff as opposed to just buying stuff. But I have multiple thoughts on this. First is, my first reaction to this news was that's reeks of desperation. Because it is. GameStop is a desperate entity. Now, for those of you who don't know, I don't particularly like GameStop. I think they are a skid mark on the used game industry. They make everyone look bad, and I feel like the only people who buy stuff at GameStop are either people who have no choice because that's the only option, or people who don't know anything about video games, so they intentionally pick GameStop. GameStop is a horrible, horrible place to buy video games, due to like some of their horrific policies. In fact, you can get better deals everywhere. And I've never come out of a GameStop thinking, yeah, that was a normal and good experience. It's always just really irritating. All the product pushing and all that kind of stuff. Do you want to pre-order this and all this shit? Like, I don't blame the employees. That's their job. They have to do that. But I've always just had beef with GameStop for their shitty ass policies. That said, this program, like I said, reeks of desperation because GameStop sees the writing on the wall. They are going to cease to exist sometime relatively soon, probably within a couple of years. And they've been trying to prepare for that in multiple ways. They've tinkered with the idea of being a publisher for a while. They tinkered with the idea of exclusive games only sold in their store. They are now doing this. At one point, they tried to bring retro stuff back in, so that they would have that market, or at least attempt to. But none of it's really been working. Now, it's too early to know about this particular program, but I don't see it working for them. This reminds me so much of what was happening with Blockbuster when they were finally dying out. For years, Blockbuster dominated like unconditionally in the rental market. And then, people would come, like Hollywood Video tried to come in, couldn't really make a dent in them. And it wasn't until Netflix got there. Netflix just was always 10 steps ahead of Blockbuster. But I remember when Blockbuster was really trying hard against Netflix, they gave away some insane deals. And one of them really reminds me of this. With Blockbuster, they had a system where you could set up like a rental club pack or something. It was like 3 rentals. And rather than have to return it like 3 days later or 5 days later, you could hold on to it absolutely as long as you wanted. But you could also swap it out for content as much as you want in that month. I don't remember what how much it was. It might have been like $20 a month, something like that. It might have even been less. But you could just go into a Blockbuster at any time, and you could swap out any game for any other game. They would scan it, do all that stuff, but there was no additional fees. I remember at one point, Blockbuster, they had their own mailing renting system like Netflix was doing, or Netflix is still technically doing that. And you could, if you returned your envelope to Blockbuster, the mind you, the one that came in the mail, you'd rented it. That came in the mail. When you were done with that, if you drove to a Blockbuster and returned it at the Blockbuster, you could trade that action in for a free rental. And I mean, there was even a phase there where Blockbuster did a promotion where if you came in with a Netflix envelope, I mean that Netflix envelope, they would give you a free rental for doing that, just to convince you that like, hey, we're so much better, we're brick and mortar, and we have all this. And this really reminds me of that, because that program was neat, but it only lasted like a year or two before Blockbuster closed up shop, because they couldn't compete. And I really think that's what's happening with GameStop, is you're seeing the death throes of GameStop. So take advantage, because they're probably this is a good deal if you're into the idea of renting games. It's also a little nostalgic throwback to the concept of renting games, by the way, in an actual store. Plus, GameStop is going to have a lot of used content that you can check out. Personally, I probably won't be taking advantage of this, just because, I just don't think I'm going to really need it. But I could see this being popular, but not popular enough to be successful. Popular amongst like gamers, but don't forget, gamers, people like us, people who would even be listening to something like this, we really don't make up the majority, or even close to it. We make up like 10% at best of people who buy video games or care about video games. And I just don't see us, swinging this program. However, I will say this for GameStop, if I was them, I would be thinking, okay, yes, we're going to kind of give this a little bit away. But hopefully that many people coming in and out of the store much more often will result in additional sales we wouldn't have otherwise had. The people who come in and they see something neat that they weren't intending to get and they pick it up, but also people getting used to just GameStop being the place they associate with video games, creating more brand loyalty, that kind of thing. Hopefully, I think that's what they're hoping this generates. Again, Blockbuster tried this almost identical program and failed. The program itself was great, but it didn't save them. So that might be my advice to you, is perhaps do this, but also, take advantage, because I still think GameStop maybe has a year or two left. So that's up to you, but that's kind of my thoughts on the whole PowerPass thing. So with that, let's move on to the next subject. This one, as I referenced a little bit before, OG Xbox backwards compatibility. Now, as I said before, I did a video on this already, so I'm not going to talk a whole lot about it. This is more of a PS. For those who don't know, if you missed my video and you for some reason don't want to just click on it, Microsoft introduced original Xbox backwards compatibility into the Xbox One, sort of. Currently, only 13 games are supported, and we know, based on what they told us, to expect the next batch maybe in like spring 2018 is what they were claiming. Now, that seems really slow, but it also doesn't seem like this program is a priority for them. There's a lot of benefits to playing it this way: better frame rate, much higher resolution, significantly reduced load times. Your original discs are supported, however, they're not actually played off the disc. The console just scans the disc, detects what it is, and then downloads an Xbox One emulated build of the game. So that's basically how it works. It is a region-free program, so I think the only game in there that was exclusive to anybody was King of Fighters NeoWave. Didn't come out in Europe, so we've got people in Europe saying that they can put the North American copy in to their console, and it does work. It downloads, which makes sense, like the 360 and the 360 backwards compatibility program on Xbox One has been region free, and Xbox One itself is region free, so it makes sense they would drop region locks for something that's not even dependent upon the disc. So that's all fine and good. So I just kind of wanted to respond to a couple of comments I got, because that video, I don't exactly know why, but that video I did was surprisingly popular for something on my channel. I mean, it got up there in the views, and I think the only reason is I got into the algorithm because I was like one of the only people making a video about that particular subject, I guess. I don't know. But even like when I Googled Xbox backwards compatibility just to see if there were any updates with it, my video started coming up on multiple browsers. So Google liked something about that video, which I'm appreciative of. because usually YouTube fucks me. It doesn't work the other way. But anyway, so I just kind of wanted to give a couple of acknowledgments. Now, the biggest comment people made that I really wish I had thought to mention, and I kind of half mentioned it, was when people were talking about various games they wanted. There was a lot of people just perplexed that Halo and Halo 2 were not on the supported list. And I had said in the video, I never mentioned Halo. I don't pretend I did, but I mentioned Grabbed by the Ghoulies because that's one of the 13 games that's supported. And my issue with Grabbed by the Ghoulies is that Grabbed by the Ghoulies was already released on Xbox One in the form of Rare Replay. So we really didn't need them to pick that. You could have devoted resources to a different entity rather than bother with a game that you've already put on that platform. And that's kind of how I feel about Halo 1 and 2. Not that they aren't welcome on the console, not that they're bad, nothing like that. It's just that they already exist in different ways on the Xbox One. I mean, they're on the Halo Master Chief Collection. There is that Halo Anniversary 360 game that is actually compatible as well. And it just didn't seem necessary, in my opinion, to make that one of the choices. So I actually give them, shall we say, credit for that. Like, if you had to pick 13 games, those two would not have been on my list for that exact reason. Not because I don't like them or anything like that. They're actually perfectly good games, as I'm sure a lot of you know. It's just they already exist on the platform. Why bother? You know, get more content. I would have easily, for the same logic, I would have easily traded Grabbed by the Ghoulies for like Stubbs the Zombie or something like that, you know, something that isn't already on there. So that was my first kind of PS to that video. Second is a lot of people were pretty excited about it. You kind of got two reactions in general. Like, wow, I give Microsoft a lot of credit. This was a really good move, blah, blah, blah. Or fuck this, I hate old games. You guys are idiots, blah, blah, blah. Like, those are the two reactions. I didn't see a whole lot of indifference. It was pretty much like, man, pat on the back to Microsoft, or fuck Xbox for how dare they do this. And then, well, you did have the occasional Sony pony. I hate fanboyism. I really hate it. I've been accused of being a fanboy on literally all platforms. Like, everything, it doesn't matter. I've been accused of it. At one point I was accused of being a ColecoVision fanboy because I made a video about it, and that same video made me, I was accused of being a ColecoVision hater for the exact same video. Like, people are fucking nuts sometimes, man. People will accuse you of weird shit when it comes to gaming, and it's like, dude, it's a fucking video game. I love video games, but let's just enjoy some good video games. Why do we have to like hate arbitrary plastic boxes? It's not necessary. So yeah, fanboyism is not something I like. And one thing I really like about this channel in general is that most people who watch it are not closed in their incredibly myopic view of video games. Like, a lot of people are very willing to embrace other ideas and try other things. But of course, you do get the occasional, like, everything that this other company does that I have nothing to do with is bad. So you had a lot of, I'm going to call them Sony ponies because it's just as stupid of a bullshit name. There's Xbots and Sony ponies and whatever. But I definitely saw some, shall we say, pro PlayStation people in the comments who were saying it's not a big deal. Sony has a better thing because with Sony, you get trophies. And I was like, yeah, but you have to pay to do the digital download and you don't have disc support. And they're like, yeah, but you get the trophies, so that's better than it being free. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I find that amusing because obviously, you know, that is the big difference. There are basically those two differences between the program, is that the Xbox version of it allows you to, if you have the 15-year-old disc, it is supported. Whereas the PlayStation concept does not. Now, the PlayStation concept, that's true. They did add trophies, but to suggest that makes it somehow better is absurd. Unless all you care about is trophy hunting, which that's not my view. I don't. I care more about content being supported. The games didn't have trophies in the first place. I'm not missing them. Yes, it would be nice. It would be nice if they had achievements or whatever, but like, I'm not losing sleep over it. The other thing is a lot of people comparing it to the PlayStation 3, saying, oh, no, the PlayStation 3 was better because Sony's program, like, that console had perfect backwards compatibility. It's like, yeah, the launch model did, and then after that they took it out. They tried emulating it for a little bit, and then they took it out completely. And while I don't dispute that the PlayStation 3 fat launch grill model is the premier backwards compatibility console with like almost perfect PS1, PS2, and obviously PS3 support, no one's disputing that. Unless you're arguing that the PS3 is Sony's current gen platform, it's a moot point, because the Xbox One is not competing with the PS3. The Xbox One is competing with the PS4. And between the two, the Xbox clearly has the better backwards compatibility program, as its own games, 360 games, and OG Xbox games are supported, while the PlayStation 4 quite simply doesn't do that. And one thing that is really interesting about this, that is seriously not getting enough credit. So I don't support digital, as a lot of you guys full well know. But Microsoft obviously has made a big deal about it with this platform. And if you bought digital versions of 360 games and then they're made compatible, they do appear in your Xbox One library as a free download. Now, people probably don't remember this, but in like 2007, maybe even 2008, Xbox launched a program called Xbox Classics on 360. Basically, it allowed you to buy digital versions of some of the original Xbox games that were supported on Xbox 360. There weren't a whole lot of them, but there were some. And basically, you just download it right then and there. And then I don't know if they shut that program down, but I know it wasn't particularly a big hit, and they never really made a big deal about it. So I noticed a guy commented in that video, and he said, so I forget which game he bought, but he bought one of the 13 Xbox One supported games. He bought it like 10 years ago, digitally, completely forgot about it. And then when they supported this, he looked at his catalog of Xbox One titles and the recent update stuff, and it was suddenly giving him the option to download the game he had bought 10 years ago. And he was impressed. And I got to say, even I'm impressed. That just means Microsoft's has a really good track record of stuff like that. And you can't say they don't support stuff. I mean, like even the Kinect, we all hated that thing, but they kept building units until not long ago. And it's like, I hated that thing. I celebrated it and I celebrated its death. I danced on the grave, much like I will with GameStop, actually. But they honored that. And that's something to be respected, because when you look at it the other way, let's take one of those games. Like, let's just say Grab by the Ghoulies, because that's what's coming to my mind. If that game, you bought it on disc, you got it working on the 360, you got it working on the the Xbox One. If you bought it digitally on the 360, it worked there and now works on your Xbox One, provided you kept the same account. You got to give them credit for that, because when you look at the competitors, both Sony and Nintendo have allowed you to buy, like Sony has allowed you to buy PlayStation 1 games on the PlayStation 3 as well as the PlayStation 4 digitally. If you let's say you downloaded Metal Gear Solid on the PS3, that game is not supported. Even if you have the same account, you can't download it to the PS4. Even if it is for sale digitally on the PS4, the games do not transfer. Nintendo's even worse about this, because like you could have bought Super Mario Brothers on the Wii, shop, or whatever, Wii Shop channel or whatever the fuck. You could have bought it there, which that game ended up, of course, on the Wii U, but your account, it didn't matter. It's not going with it. You could then you could bring that account possibly over to the Switch. Doesn't matter. My point is, you could have bought that one game 2 generations ago on Microsoft's hardware, and it transfers over to current gen, where it does not do that with the other two. And as I said before, no fanboyism here, and just acknowledging when one company does something really right by comparing it to what the other company's policy on it is, which is wrong. And in my opinion, this is one of the reasons I really hate digital games, is because you have to go through all these stupid little hoops. And I will never truly embrace digital gaming. It is not for me. But I do respect a customer's right to buy something. So if you bought that on the Xbox platform, it's more trust. You can kind of trust it more, that they have your back in the sense that it's going to keep showing up. Whereas with Nintendo, with Sony, and especially Nintendo, I know full well that if I were to buy something digitally, there is absolutely no guarantee that it will exist off of that platform or ever be recovered. And there's something to be said about that. So A couple other little notes about this program is that this one I completely screwed up. I did not acknowledge this, and I should have. The original Xbox backwards compatibility program does support the system link. So games like Crimson Skies, for example, if you actually have two Xbox Ones system linked together, you can play that game together. Supposedly that'll also work between 360 and Xbox One, or even OG Xbox and Xbox One. So that's what I've heard, although I don't have any confirmation of that. But in theory, that should work. I mean, that makes sense. But yeah, so there's that. But I would imagine the easiest cross compatibility would just be between two Xbox Ones. And supposedly this program, Microsoft wants to expand it to PC as part of their Play Anywhere Windows 10 crossover thing. That would be kind of interesting. I mean, I wouldn't use it, but it's interesting if you care about PC gaming and any of these games matter to you. I'm guessing this is something that would be more popular on console as opposed to PC, only because PC gamers, I'm not going to speak for all of you, of course, because I'm not one of you, but I've noticed a trend, at least in comments, tend to be the people who want the newest content and don't typically revisit content, yet ironically have the easiest time being able to revisit old content, and so maybe that's why they don't. I don't know, but it's not my thing. But I'm just guessing that Xbox original content on Xbox One would be more popular than on PC, only because of that. But I don't know. I don't know that. And the last point I want to make about this is a lot of people were asking about the DLC. A lot of those games like Crimson Skies, I did mention this, but it still got asked a million times. Games like Crimson Skies had DLC originally, and people were wondering if it was included, if it's supported, whatever. It's definitely not included. It's currently not supported. My guess, honestly, it will probably never be supported, just because I don't think they are going to reactivate servers and stuff just for that purpose. And because that Xbox Live system is very different than the one they have now. So I mean, I'm no programmer. Maybe you could find a different way to host it or something. I don't know exactly what they would have to do, but my guess is it's not worth it to them. But we'll see. We'll see if the program expands at all. I do want to I talked about some games I want to see. People got mad at me for mentioning Shenmue 2, which I was like, oh, geez, is it really surprising? I would want Shenmue 2. I want to see... I mentioned Stubbs the Zombie. I want to see Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2. I want to see Jet Set Radio Future. A lot of stuff Sega made, of course. There's just, like, Obscure is a great game I'd love to see on there. Second Sight. There's so many great games on the original Xbox. It is sick. And I'd love to see as many of them as possible come over. I am, however, going to make one rather strange prediction about a game that's going to be added. In my opinion, I think it's almost inevitable that this game gets added to the catalog. This is going to sound really random, but Sphinx and the Cursed Mummy. Does anybody remember that game? It's kind of obscure. It was on the original Xbox, obviously. It was also on the PlayStation 2 and the GameCube. And you might be thinking, okay, are you high? Why would you think that? That's not a game that ever got a sequel, or at least as far as I know, it didn't get a sequel. It's not popular, whatever. Why would you pick that? Well, I'm not picking it because I want it or anything like that. Here's why I think this game is happening. Because I'm a YouTuber who works on multiple gaming channels, and because I get to go to a lot of conventions and stuff, I'm on a lot of press lists. And so I got a random email from a press company basically giving me a press junket for that particular game in 2017. Like, not too long ago, I got an email basically saying, hey, the game that came out, it says the whole breakdown of what the game is. And they said originally came out on those 3 platforms. They also said it's being re-released now for PC, Mac, and Linux. And it's going to drop, I think it's actually going to be later this month. So it's around the exact same time that this podcast goes public. So my bet is if whoever owns that game has decided to take the effort to bring it back after like 15 years, they're probably going to get the Xbox original release to go up on there as well. That's just what I'm thinking. So that's my guess as like the only one that I would be really sure we'll see in the spring backwards compatibility update. But I also hope that Microsoft actually updates more frequently than that. I'm kind of hoping that they're, much like they did when they said, oh, we're only going to have like 2 games, Crimson Skies and Fusion Frenzy, and then they surprised us with 13. I'm kind of hoping they're continuing to set expectation low, that way that they kind of deliver bigger. So say, hey, we're not doing it until spring, and then, it shows up in December. You know what I'm saying? That'd be really nice. But I guess we will just move on here. So that's that. So the next subject here is the Xbox One X. Now, at the time I record this, the Xbox One X has not launched. However, it is now, if you're listening to this publicly, it has come out. Now, so I don't have sales numbers in front of me, so I'm kind of retroactively guessing here. But I'm guessing that console probably won't sell like gangbusters. It might sell like a decent little push at the beginning, and then I'm kind of thinking what's going to happen is Microsoft is going to do a bundle throughout Christmas, because that's what they do. Here's the thing: never buy Microsoft consoles right away. You don't need to, and I learned this the hard way. Microsoft consoles always come out expensive, and they drop the price on those things really quick, because Microsoft has a habit of releasing stuff in November, and then they want to make a push usually for Black Friday, which is only a couple weeks later, and then especially for Christmas. So a lot of times they'll drop it $50, $100, or they'll just suddenly have a holiday bundle that's same price but includes a whole bunch of games or an extra controller, stuff like that. It's just, I've never seen a situation where it made sense to buy an Xbox platform day one. And I've done it in the past. I have done it with the original Xbox. I did it with the Xbox 360, and I did it with the Xbox One. And in all three cases, it really wasn't necessary. The original Xbox I was able to find later cheaper, much cheaper. Xbox 360 was a little hard to find at first, but eventually got a little easier. That one I'm glad that I got right away, actually, because they didn't really drop the price of that one, but that was a different time. And Xbox One, though, probably because it's been not particularly successful, has been very easy to get cheap quickly. Like even the Xbox One S, I think it came out, it was like $300, and by the holiday that season, the standard price of it was $250. And it really didn't take long for that to happen. It was only a couple of months later. So I wouldn't be surprised if Xbox One X drops like $50, maybe even $100, or just comes with a bunch of extra content around the holidays. That's a guess, but I think that's entirely possible. So I will not be getting one right away. To those who are wondering, am I going to do a video on it? Am I doing unboxing, all that stuff? Whenever I get one, whenever that happens, yes, but there's no plan to do that anytime soon, basically. So there you go. Plus, I don't even have a 4K TV. So while there would be massive advantages to it, including Xbox backwards compatibility, as I mentioned before, it has 16 times original resolution. The Xbox One S does it at 4 times. And then the Xbox One base model does it I think it just doubles it. But anyway, so there'd be massive benefits to playing on an Xbox One X, but I don't have a reason to yet. Now I have used one actually multiple times at pre-events and stuff for Assassin's Creed Origins and things like that. I've played on it, and hell yeah, it's very nice. But I'll save my money for now. So that's my thoughts on that. Now next up, I wanted to talk about a subject that we have a Patreon backer who every month gets to pick a subject. His name is Kyle Vaughn. This month he didn't have a subject in mind, but he said I could pick. And in this case, what I decided I wanted to talk about was something that did pertain to him. He had recently just acquired a modded Xbox 360 that was, region free, but also had a couple extra bells and whistles that did all sorts of cool shit, including things like LED mods, but at the same time it also supports homebrew content and stuff like that. And it got me thinking, what is the best modded console? When you actually truly dig into it, what's the best one? And so I thought about it, and I thought about all the ones I've got that are modded in one way or another, and I thought about what opens up the most. And so I thought okay, well, back in the day when you were modding a console, most of the time that was just to play imports or just to play burned games. But then they started to get smarter. I would have to say that the best modded consoles out there are probably a battle between the original Wii. Yes, I'm giving the Wii credit for something. And the original Xbox. Now, you can do all sorts of modifications to the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, but not quite on the same level that you could with those two. Now, the original Wii was easy to break because it was basically just a GameCube. So people already kind of understood the hardware. They had been digging into it. But it also, because of the software Nintendo put on it, it made it easier to put your own software on it, which is probably why you end up with things like the Homebrew channel, and then you could put on all sorts of emulators and stuff. I mean, the Wii already had emulators designed by Nintendo for N64 games, so you could just kind of crack those and allow them to play other stuff. So that was easier. So a lot of people took advantage of that. Now, I know it sounds like I'm very partial to Xbox. It must sound like that because most of this podcast up to this point has primarily been about Xbox stuff, but that's not the case. But in this case, the original Xbox, I would have to argue, is the best possible modded console of all time. In addition to being able to, do things like play backup discs, be region free. Once you modded it, and the reason it was so easy to mod is it was basically just a PC in like a different case. That's true, and that's one of the reasons like PC gamers look at us like we're children, because like, oh look, that's cute, they just discovered something we've been able to do forever. Oh, it's like, yes, well, that's great and all, but still I'm going to enjoy this because I think it's fun. Now, a modded Xbox, there are so many things you can do to it. You can give it a bigger hard drive. You can actually go up to a 2 terabyte SSD if you really want to. Think about that. That console came out in 2001, but it supports up to a 2 terabyte SSD, which actually does have massive performance enhancements. You can upgrade the RAM. The default, I think, was 64 megabytes of RAM. I believe you can upgrade it to 128 megabytes. You can, by basically sacrificing a second Xbox board, you can upgrade the DVD-ROM drive, which will allow it to play things like CDRs. Most original Xbox drives intentionally blocked CDRs, but you can replace it with better drives that read CDRs. Not that you really need to, but they can, and allow for faster read speeds. You can change out the IDE cables with faster IDE cables that move at a much higher data rate. You can actually also, other than things like, putting in LEDs and all that kind of stuff, it turns out you can now upgrade the GPU. This has only started to be tinkered with, seriously, this year. People started realizing there are certain GPU sets that are better, that are actually compatible with that board. And the result of this is when you have all of these things working together, it's kind of like creating an Xbox 1.5. Like, it's not at the 360's level, but it's definitely more capable than an original Xbox. And I'm sure you're asking, like, well, what the hell would be the point of all that? Well, once you have the right software on it and you have all the right games on it, there are games, especially a lot of stuff that was designed in development kits. The development kits had 128 megabytes of RAM native. So a lot of games actually ran in bigger, better modes, if you want to put it that way, and are forced to scale back on like default Xbox hardware. But if you have these things, they actually output better. Supposedly HDMI boards, or at least mods at this current state, are in works for the original Xbox, which would be nice because it seems like nobody makes that effort. The original Xbox is like the only console where it seems like absolutely no one is trying to play it with an HDMI cable yet. And I don't know why. Like, even much older consoles, you stick them through a FrameMeister, and people are making efforts to get HDMI output. Not that you can't, of course you can connect component cables to an Xbox, put that into their D terminal port on a FrameMeister. I'm not saying you can't, but it seems like it's the lowest of priorities to anybody in that community. I'm not totally sure why, because it is a legit awesome console. But yeah, so once you do all these modifications, you also have things like emulators for like every console ever made up to that point, with basically the exception of the PlayStation 2 and the Dreamcast. But because of these additional modifications, those emulators, especially the N64 emulator, run a lot more stable. Now, one can argue all of this is basically pointless in the modern era because there are vastly more capable consoles. There's many other ways to play those games. But if we were to isolate every single modded console for what it is, and especially in the time it was, you got to give it to the original Xbox. An original modded Xbox is a truly cool thing. So that's my subject. That's my thoughts on that subject. Thank you, Kyle, very much for not exactly picking it, but for sort of at least inspiring it. So thank you very much to Kyle Vaughn. Now, next up here, we have a round of shout-outs. Now, every single one of these people are Patreon backers, and they're at a tier in which they get a shout-out. So basically all that happens is I just kind of say your name, talk about you for a second. And I'm very appreciative to all of you. And anybody who's listening, you can at any time upgrade to this or be involved in the podcast at any time you're choosing. You can even be on the podcast. That is an option. But anyway, let's move on here. The first shout out we've got is from Justin Webb. Hell of a nice guy. I've talked about him before every month because he's been here for a while. I've met him twice now. And I'm hoping to see him again at Missouri GameCon next year. He lives in Arkansas, and both times he's driven up to meet me. Hell of a nice guy, likes all my stuff on Facebook. Good dude. Thank you very much, Justin. Then there's Rob Janos, who again met at a convention. He came out to AVGC. Also likes all my shit on Facebook. Thanks, Rob. I appreciate that. Good dude. Trey Wagner, friend of mine. We actually hang out. At the time I record this, we just got back from having burritos, actually. We went out and got Korean burritos. They're really fucking good. Trey is a hell of a nice guy, so, whenever I have a little bit of downtime and I'm in the city, I'm like, hey, let's hang out. I go hang out with Trey. So, Trey's a good dude. And Tim Inman is the holdout. Tim, you're obviously a good guy, but I've never met you. We gotta fix that. So come to a convention, hit me up. We gotta make sure that everyone on the shoutouts list I've met at some point. That's how that should work. I think that should be not policy, but like a guideline, if you will. So thank you very much to Justin, Rob, Trey, and Tim. I really appreciate it. Next up is another subject also picked sort of by a Patreon backer. This is from Corey Marsh. Now, Corey Marsh, again, gets to pick a subject. This month, he didn't really have one. He didn't get back to me about this in time. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, Corey. So I picked one that I was pretty sure he would be fine with. As I mentioned briefly before, I went to Japan earlier this year. And one of my goals while I was there is that Corey was looking for this Metal Gear Solid Japanese collector's set, which is just a bunch of music CDs. Now, he showed it to me online. It's ridiculously expensive. It's very, very hard to find. And I tried like hell to find it there, but it's not an easy item to find, A, because it's rare, and B, because it's not obvious what it is. It basically comes in this like big white case, and it's just solid white. It kind of looks like the Beatles' White Album. It's just white. And so I was like, well, that'll be really hard. But I checked everywhere I could, but I never came across it. And I felt bad about that because obviously Corey's a good dude and I'd love to help him out with something like that. But it got me thinking like that's his fantasy Japan item, because I was going there. That's like the thing he wanted me to look for. So I thought about, what would be mine, something that came out only in Japan that I really want to get my hands on. And it actually took me a while to think about that because I've gotten a bunch of them off the list. So like, what is the de facto, like if I just need to pull an answer out real quick, what is it? And I decided what it is the Hitachi High Saturn. The Hitachi High Saturn there's actually two of them. One that I don't really care much about and one that I really do. So the Sega Saturn, as I'm sure you guys know pretty well, Sega's console, was not popular here or in Europe, but actually in Japan it was like stupid popular. And as a result, Sega couldn't really keep up with production. Like there was too much demand, believe it or not, for a Saturn. And so they actually licensed out various alternate companies to make Saturns. VTech got to make one. Victor, not VTech. Victor got to make a Saturn, as well as Hitachi. Now, Hitachi made two of them. Hitachi made a normal-looking Model 2 Sega Saturn. It was black, but it also said Hitachi High Saturn on it, as opposed to saying Sega on it. But then they made this custom design one that is like wider and has a lot of extra buttons on it, and in some cases it even has a portable screen on it. That's the Hitachi High Saturn I'm talking about. I'd love to get one of those. I think that would be cool as shit. I don't see that happening. Like I said, I was in Japan twice this year, and I went to a ton of different places, including, crazy places like Super Potato, hoping just to see one, but I never saw it anywhere. So I don't expect to find that anytime soon. I'm sure you could look on eBay. There's probably one up there somewhere, but it's not really the same thing. Like, I would love to find it and hold it and buy it then if it's reasonably priced at least. But yeah, that would be kind of my fantasy item. If I could just stumble across some random gaming thing in Japan, that's probably what it would be. The Hitachi High Saturn. So thank you very much, Corey. Again, if I get to go back, that would be great, and hopefully I could look again for you, but I'm sorry that I struck out on that. Regardless, thank you very much to Corey for backing me on that. Next up, now we're going to talk some Nintendo here for a little bit. I got a few different topics pertaining to the Switch. The first one is good news. Super Mario Odyssey is the fastest selling Mario game of all time in the United States. It is also the fastest selling Switch game. Now, the second part of that isn't that surprising because the Switch has only been out not even a full year yet, and the only game that could have possibly competed with that would have been Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, but since that was a launch title, you also had to sell the console too. So it's not really surprising that Super Mario Odyssey could beat that. Even so, that said, Legend of Zelda still sold like crazy. But Super Mario Odyssey selling as fast as it has is impressive. And I've played it quite a bit. It is a lot of fun. That is a really fun game. It's very, I mean, everybody's been saying this already, so it's kind of just, broken record here. But it really is the Super Mario 64 sequel we never got. I know a lot of people, like, I've even compared Super Mario Sunshine as like the Super Mario 64 sequel, and it was inspired. You can tell they tried, but they also tried this weird gimmick that just didn't work as well in Super Mario Sunshine, although I liked it. But this drops that gimmick, and it's just kind of that vibe of a Super Mario 64 game in the modern time. And even in modern settings, because there's obviously this fake New York type of city that they go to. New Donk City, I think is what's called. So I've been thoroughly enjoying that game, and I'm sure a lot of you have Switches, have already picked that game up. But yeah, it's definitely one to get. It is a good game. So I want to congratulate Nintendo on the success of the Switch so far, as well as that game, because I made a prediction last March that I didn't think the Switch would ultimately do all that well, and to a small extent, I kind of am still holding to that because I've made the case before that a large part of the reason I think the Switch has been successful is it cannibalized the best of the Wii U. And what that argument essentially means is it launched with Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and essentially it took the final breath, literally in this case, breath of the Wii U, to launch itself into some sort of success. Had that game only come out on the Wii U, I'm wondering how much better the Wii U would have sold at the end. Not that really matters. But it basically started by having a huge demand game that everyone wanted. But it took it from the Wii U to do it. Then the next game that they put out was Mario Kart 8, which they basically took the single most successful game of the Wii U and gave it to the Switch. So while Super Mario Odyssey is indisputably a Switch exclusive, I don't deny that it probably was in the Wii U, its development cycle at some point. And I just kind of feel like Nintendo's going to give you more repeats for the next year or so, just kind of digging into the Wii U's library, partially because the Wii U wasn't successful, so the mainstream never really played most of the games that came out on it. So there's a lot of incredibly good content on the Wii U that most people didn't know about. So if they kind of keep dropping these, it'll almost look like new games to the mainstream. Not to us, we get it, we know what the Wii U was, but a lot of people didn't. So it makes me wonder how many times they can pull that rabbit out of that hat, and if that runs out of steam before they kind of come up with their own content for it. And I know that's kind of a strange argument to make, and I'm not saying the Switch will fail. It's just I was wrong in thinking it wouldn't do that well this year. I admit it straight up. But I still wonder how well it's going to do in the long run when they're going to run out of magic. Hopefully they don't, because I want to see the Switch succeed. So for now, at least, congratulations on Super Mario Odyssey. You got a great game on a great platform. Next up, more Switch talk. Third-party Switch games are too big. So here's the thing: games like Super Mario Odyssey, they're physical editions, of course, and there's digital. I'm not. This argument is not about digital content because I don't buy the digital ones. So this problem I don't see it firsthand. I buy the physical editions of these games, and obviously when you do that, the vast majority of the data of any game is on the little cart that you're buying. However, we live in the patches era, so you put in a game, even something like Super Mario Odyssey, it's got a patch that's required to basically update the game so that a lot of bugs are removed and final updates to the game are made, like just in general improvements, because that's now part of development cycle. Is we have a due date, but you have until this day after that to keep working on the game. So whatever the game is by this per certain point, that's the version we put on a disc or we put on a cart. You just keep fucking working beyond that point, and then you keep adding to the game, keep updating it and changing it. That way that part's available so we can digitally distribute the update to the game so that when it launches, the two are basically married together. It is not a good system for future-proofing, but it is the way it is now. But anyway, so when you do that on the Switch, that's kind of annoying because the Switch only has 32 gigabytes of internal storage, as I'm sure a lot of you know, and you don't even get that full amount to play with. Now, personally, I got a 128 gigabyte micro SD card day one, popped in my Switch, so I haven't run into any problems with storage. But again, I also buy everything physically. These games have patches, but most of them aren't that bad. However, they're going to start getting worse. Games like Super Mario Odyssey is a first-party Nintendo title, and so the patch wasn't that big. It seems like the Nintendo titles have reasonably sized patches. But what it seems like is happening with third-party companies is that their patches are huge. It seems like whatever the compression algorithm is that Nintendo is using, they're not sharing it with third-party developers, and third-party developers aren't trying that hard to get those file sizes down. So what that means is, even if you're buying the physical edition of a lot of upcoming third-party games, or at this point a lot of them have come out, third-party games for the Switch, it's going to eat up a lot of storage because of all these patches that are just way too big. So get yourself a micro SD card for the Switch, probably a big one. Like I said, I have a 128 gigabyte one, but I think they make up to like around a 400 gigabyte one. Of course, they're expensive, but you might need that. I'm hoping in future iterations of the Switch, they either include more memory or they just include a micro SD card, or they allow some sort of way to at least have a hard drive attached to it for at least docked mode, not necessarily portable mode, but docked mode would be nice. I'm sure that's just a firmware update. I mean, like USB capability is already there. It's just, I think you just need a firmware update for it, but we don't have that at the time I record this anyway. So I don't know what the solution is. I think there's all you can do is really kind of voice your frustration, and hopefully Nintendo kind of gets more involved with third parties and says, like, this is how you got to compress stuff. That's all we can really hope for. But at this point, my bet is Nintendo's just thrilled the third parties are making games for the Switch at all, which we'll talk more about eventually in the Switch. I'm going to do event, and this is a long time into the future, but when the Switch hits its 1-year birthday, I'm going to do an anniversary video on it and talk about all that kind of stuff. So the last part of my Switch discussion here is I want to talk about the fact that the Switch is actually, I just kind of alluded to it, the Switch is doing well with third parties, or at least pleasing them. But one thing it's also doing is it's getting a lot of third-party indies on board. And that's kind of interesting because you're getting physical editions of games on the Switch that probably otherwise never would. And you're even getting limited run stuff. That's really more what I want to talk about. So, for example, Retro City Rampage was released physically on the Switch, but only sold, what's that game? Fangamer, I believe, sold it, and there's, only had a few thousand copies, and that's it. That's a physical Switch game that only came out there. That concept of doing limited run type of things like that has existed on things like the PS4 for a long time, because Sony, to their credit, has been very cooperative with stuff like that. Microsoft has never been cooperative with stuff like that, and I don't know why, but they haven't. And Nintendo has never been cooperative with stuff like that. But Nintendo is changing their tune, probably because they recognize it's just good to have a bigger library, especially when the library isn't bad. So they're more eager to play ball and to try to appease more retro dedicated type of people, which is good on their part. So you're going to start seeing things like I said, Retro City Rampage is out there, and limited run games themselves, the guys who almost coined that term, are going to be getting Switch games from now on. I think it's starting next year in 2018, you're going to see Switch games come for sale on their website. And I have mixed feelings about that, because I love the idea that the Switch is getting physical games, especially indie games like that. But the amount of content and the amount of games that one would have to buy to get a full set and how hard that would be. The collector in me is kind of like annoyed, even though the other part of me is like, yay, physical edition. So it's a weird internal battle, but ultimately it is a good thing. So I'm glad to see that the Switch is continuing to get that kind of support. So the last subject I want to talk about here is a little bit of movie stuff. And there's not really much to say, and you'll see why pretty quickly here. First half of this is Thor Ragnarok is out. It literally came out today, the day I'm recording this. And I really wanted to go see it before recording this podcast because I really wanted to be able to talk about it. Unfortunately, time did not allow for that. So hopefully I go see it afterwards. I heard it's really good. I really want to check it out. And hopefully you guys respond, because by the time most of you hear this, that movie will have been out for a while. So a lot of you will have seen it. So feel free to talk about it. I'm really excited about the continued evolution of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I've really enjoyed it for quite some time. And I just want to keep seeing where it goes. I'm happy about that. So hopefully I ended up liking that movie, and I'm sure I did. And then last but not least, and this applies to everybody, the Star Wars The Last Jedi is almost out. If you're hearing this the day it came out on Patreon or the day it comes out publicly, Star Wars The Last Jedi is almost out. Can your body handle it? Are you ready? Obviously, I'm excited. I'm a huge Star Wars guy. After both Force Awakens and Rogue One, I did live streams just talking about those. Like, this is a video game channel primarily, but that's how much I love Star Wars, is that I did, live streams on those two things. And so I'm probably going to do the same thing with that. We'll see, but I believe it comes out December 18th. So we're not that far away, and I'm excited about it. And I just saw, this is old hat by the time anybody really knows about this. I think it was old hat even when I saw it, but there was a recently dropped teaser trailer from the movie that I was just like, oh, fuck, I want to go see this shit. So, yeah, it was like Luke inside the Millennium Falcon and stuff, and just kind of like, ooh, shit, I remember this. And, yeah, I know. Nostalgia. Remember that? Remember berries? Yeah, South Park. But, yeah, that's, I guess, all I'm going to say on Star Wars. I'm really excited to see it. I just hope it doesn't let me down. But I mean, like, I'm not super like stoked about it. I don't have like unrealistic expectations. All I want it to be is a competent Star Wars story, and I don't want it to be The Empire Strikes Back. Force Awakens got a bit of a pass by being A New Hope. But move on. I loved Rogue One. I actually liked Rogue One more than I liked Force Awakens. I'm in that category. But Rogue One in of itself was weird, tonally anyway. And some parts of it were just straight up like, okay, no. But again, you can go watch my old videos on that. So I'm just hoping that The Last Jedi is a Star Wars movie we haven't seen before and is competent. Like, those are the goals. So there you go. Anyway, guys, that is it for this episode of the Figure It Out cast. I want to thank you guys very much for listening. I want to thank Corey, Tim, Trey, Rob, Justin, and Kyle very much for their continued support, as well as anybody who else is supporting on Patreon, or just if you're just watching this on YouTube, I appreciate that too. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a good one.